Is the New York Times bailing on President Joe Biden? That's what it looks like. Over the past few days, the traditionally liberal news outlet has published multiple opinion pieces by guest writers scrutinizing Biden's current position as the presumptive 2024 Democratic nominee. Let's take a look at some of the headlines. The struggles of President Biden and the truth about aging. No poll can tell Biden what he needs to hear. Doing nothing about Biden is the riskiest plan of all. The Philly girl shielding Biden from the bad news. Should Biden step aside or stay in? What prominent Democrats are saying.
The outlet has also published pieces examining talks of Biden dropping out. Look at this headline. Biden tells allies he knows he has only days to salvage candidacy. Major Democratic donors devise plans to pressure Biden to step aside. The New York Times' seeming skewering of Biden left readers irate. Senator John Fetterman reacted, posting on X, quote, "The twice impeached, consumed by revenge, 34 felony conviction serial liar, vowed to be a dictator, Project 2025 Trump, yet the media still obsesses on smearing a good president and decent man. If anyone lost their way, it's the New York Times." Journalist Besh Schloss posted, quote, "Seriously, what is wrong with the New York Times that it would publish a column like this on the 4th of July? Political scientist Miranda Yaver wrote, quote, "On the 4th of July, the New York Times published this unpatriotic excuse for an op-ed, legitimizing not voting when democracy is on the line and authoritarians looming with the blessing of the court that the New York Times has barely covered. Today, I canceled my subscription." Well, happy Independence Day to you. You are now free of the New York Times. I don't think that the New York Times is far off with their take. I mean, this is not a radical thing to say that someone that over 70% of the country believes cannot run it should not be president. That's not a crazy thing to say. The New York Times is doing the Democratic Party and the liberals a service by saying, hey, we should push them out. That's their role as a newspaper, to publish op-eds even on holidays.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should obviously be, I guess, not applauding, because I never want to applaud the New York Times, but giving them a little bit of positive reinforcement for finally telling the truth. I mean, this is the same paper that 2 weeks ago was running cover for Joe Biden and going along with the idea that the videos of him were cheap fakes. They were describing the videos as manipulated or selectively edited and part of a right-wing smear campaign against the president. Now they are admitting what we all know to be true. And it's quite funny to watch their subscribers have this meltdown about it, because the New York Times for the past, 5 to 10 years has decided that for the health of their paper, to have loyal subscribers, that they are going to market their news towards basically liberal wine moms and aunts and terminally online left liberals on Twitter. And they have succeeded at that. They've been successful when a lot of other print publications have been doing poorly. But the trade-off is that when they do anything that is seen as anti-Democratic Party, they get these little meltdowns all over social media where people claim they're canceling their subscriptions and they're never going to read the New York Times again. And they've been simultaneously accusing the media of not being harsh enough on Donald Trump, which, if you've read the New York Times, you know is totally bogus and a ridiculous thing to say. But it's just insane to watch, the media do one modicum of criticism of the Democratic Party and of Joe Biden, and suddenly they're considered to be like right-wing rags. I mean, it's just crazy.
And the Times, by the way, I just did a quick search. In the past 3 days, at least 8 pieces on the Supreme Court. The debate was a week ago. To say that you're not covering the Supreme Court and instead you're just slandering Biden, it's just not accurate with what we're seeing from the New York Times. And to make the statement, how could they do this on the 4th of July? There is nothing more patriotic than criticizing the president. That's kind of what the 4th of July is all about, being angry at guys that are the most in power. It's very patriotic to criticize the president on the 4th of July, but I think at the heart of this is pundits don't want any criticism of Biden. They see anyone that spends any time criticizing him from within their party or on the left as someone who is undemocratic, that somehow by opposing the Democratic candidate we didn't have a primary for is an undemocratic position to take. What would be pro-democracy would be holding a primary. Let us vote for the guy in power. That's what democracy is all about. And it's just talking points from a party that in 2016 fought in a court of law to say that actually party leadership, not the members voting in the party, can handpick and favor candidates. This was when Hillary Clinton was getting funds from the Victory Fund, which was supposed to be used for the Democratic candidate that won the nomination and would face off with Trump in 2016. Instead, she was pulling those funds during her competition with Bernie Sanders to quash him in the primary. They deliberately decided to pick the candidate that would win, and the court of law ruled that actually it's party business, that they do have the right to do that. So how can this same party preach democracy and you have to vote for us or else and call that democracy? It's just ridiculous. And of course, John Fetterman is right on board, and a lot of the darlings of the establishment are right on board with it. But I think even the more mainstream centrist members of the Democratic Party are kind of sick of that talking point.
I am curious about Fetterman's, I guess, newfound loyalty to Joe Biden. He's been one of the most vocal voices defending him. I mean, the best guess that I have is he sees some parallel with his situation through his stroke recovery and then his time at Walter Reed treating clinical depression to what Joe Biden is going through. But the difference, obviously, is that Fetterman's conditions were recoverable. If Joe Biden sincerely has dementia, his is not. It's actually only going to get progressively worse. Now, on the media aspect of this, too, I mean, I'm so disturbed by how the media is trying to pretend that they didn't know until the debate what Joe Biden was like. The New York Times executive editor, Joe Kahn, sent a memo to staff a couple of days ago that said there's ample speculation online about what the news media did and didn't do with respect to covering the president's age. We have stayed on that story at every turn, always with nuance and context through today's outstanding report. Well, 2 weeks ago, they published a headline, "How Misleading Videos Are Trailing Biden as He Battles Age Doubts." A flurry of recent clips, many of them edited or lacking context, laid bare a major challenge for the president as he tries to persuade voters he has the energy for a second term. So they weren't on the Biden age story in any sense of truth-telling. They were on the Biden age story to run cover for the White House. And Semaphore has an article out from Jill Abramson, who was a former executive editor of the New York Times, and she claims again that the White House was engaged in such a masterful cover-up that the media they couldn't possibly know. All of these people who claim to be so well-sourced in the White House couldn't possibly know that Joe Biden's health was fading. But then she goes on to admit in this piece, contradicting her own argument, that people didn't push hard enough to get the story because they did not want to be accused of helping Donald Trump, because apparently that's the job of the media now, is to make sure the bad guy doesn't win. And CNN admits in an article, a reporter told CNN, someone who works at the White House, who is a White House press corps reporter, says, "I think some folks are left to conclude that these stories are too painful to report or that they should pick their spots more. It's clear the age stories have angered the White House and the liberal Twitter sphere the most." So actively admitting that the media did not dig into questions about Biden's age, despite massive concern from the American voters, because they were worried that the White House and Twitter were going to be mad. They have completely abdicated any responsibility, any duty they have to informing voters, to holding people in power accountable. They abdicated their most basic responsibility as journalists. None of these people should have jobs. These outlets shouldn't exist if they can't do the basic job of asking basic questions about the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah, I think this is the classic case of people who are, pundits, people who pay attention to Democrats, people who are Democratic strategists, being so fundamentally disconnected from everyday people that they think they can gaslight them somehow through strategic messaging campaigns and putting Biden on the campaign trail and having him perform slightly better than he did on the debate stage, that this will repair what they saw. It's a classic case of don't trust your lying eyes, which everyone was joking about. Like, I'm not saying don't trust your lying eyes, but I am saying that what you saw is not a big deal. I'm going to make up your mind about what you saw for you. I'm not going to tell you you didn't see it, because that would be, disrespectful and questioning your intelligence. And then they just do precisely that, but in a different way. That is why people are sick of the uniparty. That's why people are sick of the classic politicians we've had. And I think that's exactly why people support populist candidates like Donald Trump, because they're not willing to tell people something that's contrary to the evidence in their everyday lives. And so trust the polls, trust the data that shows the majority of people don't think this guy's fit for public office. Can you expect people to show up on election day and cast a ballot for someone they don't believe can be the president? They need someone else in office before it comes to the point of people casting their ballots. And the Democratic Party is just ignoring what people are telling them at this point, and they're getting in their own way. They're letting their own egos and belief that they control the party and they control American politics get in the way of them actually winning an election by earning votes instead of demanding them.
Yeah, and it's true that the White House was mad when people asked questions about Biden's age. Of course they were. James Rosen at Newsmax was one of the first reporters to ask about this back in 2022, and he was blackballed from reporting on the White House, and none of his press colleagues stood up for him, the same ones who now claim they had no idea what was happening. Biden had an incident in September of 2022 where he shouted out Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, who had passed away months prior, and Alex Thompson at Axios is now reporting that it was on Biden's teleprompter at the exact moment he shouted her out in the audience that she had passed away. So the truth was right there in front of him for him to see that she was not there because she was dead, and he still tried to find her in the crowd. That was in September of 2022. We are now 2 years on from that, and the media is going to throw their hands up and say, oh no, we totally didn't know. It's obviously total. What they're doing is they're trying to claim that they are stupid or bad at their jobs because they don't want to admit that they lied. They view being seen as bad at their jobs as marginally better than being called liars, but that is exactly what they are. We're going to have to leave it there. More rising after this.